So reading the book, you can see throughout it that you're a huge fan of Jane Austen, and that's why you wrote the book, really, isn't it? Because you were such a huge fan.
Yes.
Was it quite hard mixing kind of Jane Austen's style of writing with your own style of writing?
Well, I wasn't trying to mix them, really. I was trying to do all of it in Jane Austen's style,
Yeah.
as if it had been written either by her or during her time. And normally I think this would have been very difficult with any writer, but it's just that I've read her and reread her all
So
my
many times.
life, virtually from the time I could read at all, so that the way in which she writes is really part of my mindset, and I can move into it relatively easily. Whereas if you'd asked me, to write in the way of a detective story written by the hard-boiled school of American, and they're very, very fine works of literature, but I just couldn't do it. It wouldn't be realistic at all. It would sound very artificial. But somehow I could move into that world. And moving into that world, I found the voice, really.
Found the voice, yeah.
Yes, I found the voice.
We were talking about the voice yesterday with John Mullen, and he said that every single Austen character had its own voice, and he had a very good example with Mr. Hurst in Pride and Prejudice, who only says one sentence throughout the whole of the book, but it's very distinctively kind of Mr. Hurst.
Yes.
Your book is set 6 years after Pride and Prejudice. How did you kind of carry on the individuality of the characters, but developed?
Well, I did think it was important. Of course, I have some original characters. Every writer wants some characterisation to be original, and there was no problem. But I had to take account, really, of very much of what Jane Austen tells us. She doesn't tell us very much, but I think through Mrs. Gardiner, she does more or less say that one of the reasons why it was such a happy marriage was that they taught each other something. He learned to be more light-hearted, more amusing, not to be quite so serious, with such a witty and funny and lovely and lively wife. And she gained from his knowledge. And one thing, you see, is very interesting to me. He had a very, very fine library, which he said, Darcy said, was the work of many generations. And I think Elizabeth would probably have felt that her education in some ways had been very superficial, and that she would enjoy having a library of that sort, and reading, and discussing the books with him. So she gained a tremendous lot too. This was very important to think that is very clearly suggested by Jane Austen. She tells us it was happy. So I certainly wouldn't have them quarrel.
No, not at all. And you can see the character's growth kind of very well.
I hope they did seem to develop from what she had given us.
Yes.
I mean, the last thing I wanted to do was to change their basic nature.
Oh, no.
Really, because I was writing 6 weeks on, 6 years on. 6 years of a very happy marriage.
Yes, yeah. Very. Death Comes to Pemberley, the film rights have come out for that. If you could cast it in your perfect cast, who would be your Wickham, your Lydia, your Elizabeth, and your Darcy?
I don't honestly feel I can answer that. I really don't, because very often I would think of people, who were great heroes when I was a girl in this sort of film world, who've long since died and passed on.
Oh no, you can include them.
It's no, I don't seem to see them. When I think of them, I'm seeing them really as they were, I suppose, in the BBC programme, more or less. I certainly see Darcy as he was then, but I don't know that the same people will be cast, and I don't think the writer has much say over the casting.
No,
and indeed, you haven't got the knowledge of who is available and who can do it, and what their other commitments are. It's very. The casting is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's difficult. But I don't think there are none that really come into mind. In a sense, one would like to see some of the old people. I thought that Mr. Bennet was particularly good, but he might not be too old. But I thought Mr. Bennet was perfect.
He really
not
was,
only did he look as I imagined Mr. Bennet, but he was the one who could speak the Austen dialogue better.
Yes,
he really seemed to take over the Austen dialogue in a way.
Yeah.
Sometimes with modern young actresses, trained of course in television for modern speaking, sort of missed somehow the rhythm of it, of the sort of slight irony of it, of this wonderful dialogue that she wrote.
It perfectly,
But he got Mr. Darcy absolutely, Mr. Bennett absolutely, didn't he?
Yes, he did, absolutely. And paired with Alison Steadman, she was brilliant as
well. She was absolutely marvellous, of course, and she's a wonderful actress. But I think that they always forget, everybody forgets, that actually Mrs. Bennet must have been no more than 40.
Yes.
And obviously,
age is very important.
Do you remember Mr. Bennet says when she talks about marriages for the girls that he may as well take Mrs. Bennet because she was as pretty as any of them. And obviously he married her because she was lively and very pretty and probably much younger than he was.
Well, yes.
And as a result of that, he found himself married to a rather stupid woman. It says among the other books.
Very ironic, isn't it?
It's so ironic. But she would be young and you know, and game for a little romance herself, really.
Yes,
it wasn't only Mr. Bennet who had a disappointing marriage in that marriage.
Yes.
But it's typical of Jane Austen. The more you read a book, the more you discover of the characters.
Every time you read it, there's something new.
You discover something new.
Are you still finding that? How many times have you read Pride and Prejudice? Thousands, I imagine.
Some of it's almost by heart, I suppose. Yeah. But you do.
Yes,
and the last time reading it very, very carefully, because of the book, I discovered that between that first disastrous proposal of Mr. Darcy to Elizabeth and the successful one, when they were both at home and they were walking in the woods, they were only together alone for about 10 to 15 minutes.
A lot changes
in
10 to 15 minutes.
Something had been going on, you know.
Yes, something has been going on. Jane Austen missed something out of the book there.
Yes, absolutely. I'll take my spectacles off.
No, I think that's brilliant. But thank you so much for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. And hopefully we'll maybe see you for the festival in September.
Well, it's been lovely. I think it's the most marvellous centre.
Oh, brilliant.
I've learnt a whole lot, and it's wonderful to see the actual clothes they would have worn. And tremendous amount of useful information about the book, so you know just where you are, and about the life that she lived here in Bath, and the house that is exactly typical of the kind of houses she would have lived in.
Yeah.
So anyone who's coming to Bath who loves Jane Austen certainly should come here, and it'll be a wonderful experience, as it has for me.
Yes.
So
brilliant.
Thank you for entertaining me so well.
No, it's been brilliant. Yes. You never know, we might get P.D. James in a bonnet. All right.
Yes, if I were a child, I'd be dressing up here. Or a child.